It's off the pitch, we shouldn't really care what happens off the pitch.
It's his personal life and he should be allowed to deal with that himself without it being in the papers, the press, everywhere you look.
He's done nothing wrong that thousands of people in this country haven't done since time immemorial, especially people like MPs, people at the higher end of the strata. So
there's a man who's never seen the Jeremy Kyle show.
Although some of their viewers, presumably sickened by the sight of Terry looming large and peering over the host's shoulder, seemed less than impressed with the whole of football.
Emails coming in saying, you know, what's the matter with these footballers? They can't string a sentence together, and yet they say that you know, they have...
Still, the question of whether Terry should be captain or not was about to be answered as Fabio Capello returned to act as a pressure magnet.
All the pressure now on Fabio Capello.
In fact, the pressure was now on both of them and the coverage reached fever pitch. Capello was bothered at the airport.
No comments, please.
Excuse me, guys.
When are you expecting to meet him?
No comments, please. I just arrived, wait.
He was followed to his car. He was shown limping into his flat.
Lives in a top floor flat. It's quite a climb, isn't it, when you've just had an operation on your knee?
The next morning he was helpfully shown limping out of his flat. Sky's vulture cam took to the skies so we could look down on John Terry slightly more than we already did, and other cameras showed him leaving the Chelsea grounds on his way to Wembley in his car. As Capello waited at Wembley, the news desperately zoomed in on any vehicle which looked like it might be driven by an adulterer, and then the meeting itself took place and the inevitable occurred.
John Terry has been sacked as England captain after a week of damaging allegations about his personal life.
Yes, Terry got the chop. All that pressure had paid off. The one good bit of news for John Terry was that for whatever reason Vanessa wasn't going to sell her story, an announcement she made via Max Clifford, who now appeared to be directing a soap scene about his own private life.
Yeah, you're up to speed.
Yeah, straight down the road.
Talking at this level, okay. I haven't spoken to anybody about my private life. They have spoken to everybody about my private life.
Anyway, if a super injunction makes a story disappear because the news can't talk about it, the whole Terry affair was the polar opposite, a lurid story that largely exists because the news is talking about it. It was an unedifying tussle over the sexual morality of a man who kicks a ball around on a lawn for a living, which made everyone involved look a bit rubbish, but worst of all, upset one little boy!
Were you upset by the decision?
Proud of yourself, are you? The news? You monster.
Creatures! And it's been a high-profile week for beasties of all stripes as Sky broadcast a stomach-churning report on the growing trade for leeches. It seems the medieval bloodsuckers have garnered newfound popularity after being touted on gaudy chat shows by celebrity idiots.
It crawls in, and you feel it bite down on you.
Actually, I think she's describing sex with Ashton Kutcher.
And then you just watch it swell up and get fatter and fatter.
Well, that's what happens in a relationship.
That glitzy Hollywood endorsement was good news for the owners of this horrible Russian leech farm.
The female-dominated workforce makes for a maternal atmosphere.
There is always contact and a special relationship between humans and leeches. Women have a maternal instinct, so they are better at doing this delicate and complicated work than men.
Hope they don't breastfeed them.
Having depicted the delightful leech rearing process, Sky showed us a great interview with a leech fan.
It always gives me beautiful, healthy skin. The blood flows to my face and makes it younger.
The gory climax of the treatment is cutting the gorged leech in half and covering the face with the resulting blood.
Oh, women.
From leech blood to rat justice, as another informative Sky report dispassionately covers charges of animal cruelty lodged in an Australian court following last year's murder of a rat on I'm a Celebrity.
In case you're wondering how the rat got on, let's take a look at some of its best bits.
Magistrate Mark Buscombe said it was clear that unnecessary pain had been inflicted and that a corporate entity of the size of ITV needed to exercise greater care when having an animal killed for the purpose of causing greater sensationalism and attention for its programme.
I'm sure they'll bear that in mind when they make that show where Ant and Dec kill a dog.
Yes, thank God you won't have to witness anything like this because ITV are taking steps to make sure it never happens again.
This was an oversight and we have since thoroughly reviewed our procedures and are putting in place a comprehensive training programme to ensure that this does not happen in future series.
I'd like to see what that comprehensive training programme looks like. I'm sure it's terribly thorough.
But rats weren't the only animals shown slipping down the human gullet as ITV transmitted a startling report on the culture war between dog lovers and dog eaters in China.
You'd never think of eating your dog then?
No.
Yes, apparently modern Chinese folk are coming round to the thought that dogs might be people too.
I used to eat dogs, but when I started caring for them, I got a different feeling. I can't eat them anymore.
I imagine I'll be the same when I have children.
Of course, no report on dog eating would be complete without a grisly money shot of some dog eating.
This is a skiing. It's very good for you. The meat is nutritious and warming in the cold weather.
When I see them in a stew like that, I think dogs are a bit like onions, really. Every time I cut one up, I start crying.
Now here is some verse, inspired by recent events, courtesy of our resident poet, Tim Key.
This is a poem about politicians. Dreadful. I'm thinking of the C word. There was a big do arranged for all the MPs to discuss how wretched they were, and to eat humble pie as regards the expenses fiasco. The press were invited and everyone had to drink and mingle and apologise as much as possible. Hoon sidestepped a hack and waddled over to Ed Balls. "Ear, is this wine free?" he asked. Straw poked his beak in. Might not be, because we've all been naughty. "I don't think it is free," Widdicombe squawked, sipping from her hip flask. The waiters served up braised venison and potatoes and fishes in sherry. But increasingly the MPs declined, for fear of actually having to pay, as some gritted their teeth or gnawed at their lips from the hunger. Widdicombe unwrapped her sarnies. The Miliband's winked at her and ate their little yoghurts they'd stowed in their little briefcases. After a couple of speeches admitting they were all wankers, the MPs spilled out into the road. Some confused, abortive hailing of black cabs ensued. There was no guarantee there'd be freebies, you see. Hoon turned to Balls. "Ear, do you know anything about night buses?" Balls tapped his bicycle helmet and pointed at his trouser clips. Hoon nodded, and he huffed. And he set off on foot to his nearest home.
Question: what's got two faces and one giant pair of balls? Answer: the average MP. Huh? Am I right? I think I am. Huh?
Yes, following the expenses stinkfest, many believe the House of Commons contains more con artists than a Hustle box set.
I mean, I haven't seen so many dirty snouts and slimy arseholes crammed into such a small space since I last looked inside a sausage.
Recently, Westminster tried to draw a line under the whole sorry saga by getting Sir Thomas Legg to review the expenses system. His Legg report asked MPs to pay back over £1 million. That's the sort of news that makes everybody laugh.
10 to 3, the headlines. MPs are ordered to repay more than £1 million for expenses. A long-awaited review says the system is deeply flawed.
But worse was to come for the beleaguered political class, because the Crown Prosecution Service announced it was preparing to press charges against some MPs.
Once again, the BBC threw live to the scene of the CPS reception, which their reporter was standing outside, brilliantly positioned so she wouldn't be able to witness the QCDPP of the CPS dropping some MPs in the SH1T. He revealed that 3 Labour MPs and 1 Tory peer were going to be charged.
And just to put noses further out of joint, their lawyers raised the issue of parliamentary privilege, a law so old it was carved into the side of a turnip back in 1689.
The thought of this being used as a legal defence for politicians facing criminal charges made almost every newspaper columnist in the land unbelievably angry.
On the BBC News channel, political commentator Anthony Howard was so flabbergasted he forgot one of his own areas of expertise.
What the 3 MPs are trying to say is that submission of expenses is a proceeding in Parliament. I think that's stretching things a bit myself, but there we are. I'm not, well, I am actually a lawyer, but...
One of the accused, Jim Devine, cut a lonely figure on Channel 4 News, if you ignored all the reporters thronging around him. He seemed very keen to get his side of the story across in the media. When Sky excitedly threw live to their correspondent for an interview with Mr Devine, they appeared to capture a workman in the background having a crafty piss and a fag.
That's it, just stub it out in the piss. and walk away like nothing's happened. Textbook stealth. Bet he's shit hot at Metal Gear Solid.
In an amusing interview with Channel 4 News, Devine seemed to almost outwit Krishnan Guru Murthy by appearing too stupid to argue with.
What you seem to have explained to us is that you put in a false receipt. It was a receipt for one thing which said another, and that's obviously why they've come after you.
No, the false receipt would be if the £5,500 was going in my pocket.
No,
what I'm saying to you,
it's false if it wasn't what you said it was.
This is a bit like watching a semantic tussle between a magistrate and a cloth.
But you can see, I mean, surely that a receipt that says one thing but is actually for another is a false receipt.
Sorry, what receipt?
Surely you can see, if you just take a step back for a second, where the rest of us are looking from, that if you put in a receipt for one thing and it's actually for something else, that is false, and therefore you've broken the law.
That sounds reasonable, but if Krishnan took a step back for a second from his position and looked at this in a cosmic way, he'd see we're all just atoms in a big, meaningless, swirling soup, that none of this matters, and the word law is just a noise made of air. All the main party leaders were keen to be seen to be outraged by the whole thing. Gordon Brown said it was serious.
These are very serious criminal allegations.
David Cameron said it was serious.
These are extremely serious matters.
And Nick Clegg said it was...
whatever Nick Clegg said.
The fact that 3 Labour MPs and only 1 Tory peer were charged was great news for the humanoid David Cameron, who promptly stood in front of the cast of Skins delivering a speech in which he repeatedly promised to fix broken politics.
Today I want to talk about how we fix our broken politics. Why should people believe that we will fix our broken politics, fixing broken politics, broken politics? Tomorrow we publish our draft manifesto on fixing broken politics. We've got to fix our broken politics, and we've got to start fixing it right now.
You want to start by fixing that broken record?
Part of his fixing plan would involve making lobbying more transparent and MPs more accountable.
Mainly, though, it would involve ousting Gordon Brown, who the humanoid was understandably keen to finger as the personal embodiment of the entire expenses mess.
He represents the dying days of secrecy and suspicion. We are a new generation at ease with openness and trust.
Yes, the gloves are truly off in the run-up to the election. If only we knew when it was.
We still haven't got a date for the general election.
May the 6th.
But listening to the politicians, you'd think we were already in the thick of it.
No, I think you'll find that's got interesting dialogue in it.
But what are voters concerned about? Well, our political editor, Nick Robinson, is travelling across the UK to find out.
Yes, the BBC's Nick Robinson was so keen to find out what the pleb in the road really thinks about politics, he hit the streets last week to tour marginal constituencies in his funny little car.
It was a bit like an episode of Mr. Bean, really, minus any of the good elements of an episode of Mr. Bean.
The series was called Taking the Pulse, but it should really have been called Lugging the Box, since that's what he spent most of his time doing. He took his special ballot box everywhere, into factories, round curry houses, down pavements. He even let it ride on the roof rack of his car, even though it would clearly fit on the back seat, this show-off. His first port of call was Cardiff, where he eagerly entered a Welsh gym.
Which is something John Barrowman probably did a lot during the filming of Torchwood.
Once inside its warm walls, he asked the Keep Fit fanatics within if they wanted another 5 years of labour.
Although most of them were sweating like they'd just done 5 years of labour.
I would despair, I think, of 5 years of labour.
God, I haven't seen a man sweat like that since, actually I don't want to go into it.
Next he hit the north, to the stereotypical northern town of Pendle, where he shared a bed with some northerners to ask them,
do the Conservatives understand people like you?
I don't think that Conservatives ever understand the working man.
They do if they got the subtitles on.
From the north to the Midlands.
Wake up, Dudley. You could decide who's in power for the next few years.
Morning, Tiggy.
Oh, don't ask her, she'll vote for Iggle Piggle. Anyway, during his tour, Nick asked everyone for their opinions. Men standing too close to the camera, women reflected in his specs, people furiously tugging their bells.
But despite the wide spread of voters, it isn't the most rigorously conducted poll I've ever seen.
You can put a tick or an X or a question mark. There's hardly any secrecy. Some of the voters look like they've been drinking. Some clearly aren't 18. There's wholesale deliberate damage to the ballot papers going on. Children shit into the ballot box. And some of the questions are a philosophical mindfuck. Oh, and at the end he just pisses off without even telling you the results.
Mind you, to be fair, it was better than the Afghan election.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Good night.